You. Hello, everyone. Happy day. We are back for episode 2 of season 2 of the Lesline Does Wellness podcast. I am so happy I have a guest with us, Dr. Akhu. I'm going to let her introduce herself. Before she does that, though, this is the R. So we're going into breathe deep. So last episode, we talked about being gentle with yourself as a new mom. Today, we're going to talk about rest, specifically as a new mom. And is it really possible? So I'm going to let Dr. Akhu introduce herself, say all of her accolades. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for doing this, for helping moms, and for having me on. I am so thrilled to be here. I am Dr. Akhu. I am a licensed clinical psychologist with over 25 years in the field. But most importantly, I am the mom of 2. And so I've been there and I've done that, and I've helped many moms from all levels, people who wanting to be moms and having difficulty with it, new moms, moms of teenagers. It's definitely a ride the whole way through. And so one of the things I love doing is supporting women, especially Black women, figuring out how to lay down their burdens and replace toxic stress with inner peace. So I'll say more about me as we go on, but that's enough of an introduction. Let's talk about how to help people.
Yeah. Oh, that was a good. I was like, I was on mute, but like that was good. Wow. All right. And I heard I'm not there yet in the teenage years because my kids are under 5. I have a almost 5-year-old son and a 3-year-old girl. So, but I've been hearing actually this morning, I was talking with somebody and they're like, pray for me. They got a teenage son and she's just like, I'm going through it. So
Ooh, let's start there for just a second. Because that perspective, when we, especially as a new mom, especially the first time, you don't know anything and you're just totally overwhelmed by the experience. It's really important to understand that it just changes all the time, and the experience changes. And the reality is teenagers are difficult, and as hard as having new ones are, it's something to really enjoy because they are challenging. It's a lot of physical work when they're little.
yeah.
The older they get, the more psychological work it is, the more emotional work it is. When they're little, you can put them down and they stay there. You can distract them. The problems are they're definitely problems and challenges, and it's physically exhausting. But when they're teenagers, they've got attitude, they want to go out with their friends. Like it's a whole bunch, it's a total different level of worry. And what happens so often is that we are so exhausted when they're little that we don't really enjoy it. And then we get to when they're teenagers, we're like, damn, I missed the good stuff. So I'm just going to encourage everybody, and we're going to talk about how people can really enjoy when they're little, because that's the sweet stuff. That's the way there's a reason why they are not born as teenagers. You have to be connected to them in order to keep them when they're teenagers. And I say that, I said I'm a mom of 2. My oldest just turned 30.
Oh,
I know, right? I don't feel old enough to have a 30-year-old. My oldest just turned 30. And my little one is 14.
oh my gosh. Wow. You look, I'm 31. I forget. Once I turned 30, I honestly, I really have to, 91 is when I was born. So there's the math. So your son is like
My daughter. I have 2 daughters.
Okay. Your daughter is you have a daughter that's mine. Wow. You look the same.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I feel the same, but I definitely, yep. And I wasn't 16 when I had her either.
Right,
So
right. Yeah. Make sure. And that's, everybody's journey is different. But wow, Dr. Akhu. Okay. So let's get into rest. And let me make sure I'm going in the order of my questions, just so because I have so many things I want to like ask, but I'm like, let me stay on track. Okay. So yeah. So going into that, how can new moms find the time to rest? Like I opened up with, is it possible?
Yeah, that's a difficult question because it really depends on the circumstances,
Yeah.
right? How possible it is. But I think the biggest key is to give yourself permission to rest when you're a new mom.
Mm.
Because I think what often happens, and it's really about being in this Western society where motherhood is not valued, that we become moms and we think we can do all the stuff we did before. And we're trying to do all the stuff we did before, and we're totally worn out. So to give yourself permission to rest, and I know people say when the baby takes a nap, you should take a nap. Like really, eh, really strive to do that. And but you also have to give yourself permission for things not to be perfect, right? For your house not to be perfectly clean like it might have been before, right? For things not to be perfect. So what I suggest is you prioritize, right? Really figure out what are the things that really make a difference for you, that really would drive you crazy if you didn't do them. Try to do those things and try to rest because you really need it. It's an exhausting job. Little people are just, they require a lot of work. So that's what I have to say about that. I do think it's so important, but given your circumstances, it may be harder than others. If you're a single mom, if you don't have a good family network, a good community network, it may be harder to rest. But even then, to try to find your spaces and places, even if they're little spaces and places to rest, and give yourself permission.
I love that. And you said so many different like good great things. The one thing you said I haven't really heard it that way is like Western society doesn't value motherhood. Like they don't value us as moms, right? Is what you said. And that definitely I didn't realize at the time. Like I'm still a new mom, but I didn't realize when I first had my kids that that's what was like playing on my psyche, if you will. Like I was like, I have to get back to work. Like that was like on the back of my head the whole 6 to 12 weeks after having them. It's like I have to get back to work. I have to get back to work. And then it's like you're learning how to, I pumped because I was like, I have to pump because when I go back to work, I want to make So there's all these new things that I'm learning. I remember one time I spilled some of the milk and I was just like, that was like the last straw for me. Like, that was one story that I just was so distraught. Thankfully I do have a supportive husband. Like I don't know how single moms, like I really don't. And I would love for you, because there was somebody I recently did talk to who is a single mom. She has a 2-month old, like she just had the baby. And what's so interesting is when I launched this podcast, she reached out to me. So I would love, and I was just listening, but I would love for you, if you don't mind, to maybe go more in depth, like for single moms, because with partners, we took talk about delegation. That's all it really it is. It's delegating and telling them what you need. But I really would like for you, if you don't mind, to just maybe give some advice to single moms.
I would be happy to the best of my ability. I was a single mom for a minute in between. I have, as I said, two daughters. They're 15 years apart. And so my first marriage ended in divorce. I was a single mom for a while in the middle, then got remarried and had another child. And what I can say is, it is really extra hard to be a single mom. And having done both, knowing that even those of us, and so many of us complain about our husbands and they don't do it enough and they don't do it the way we want them to do it, but just having another adult in the house so that you can go to the bathroom and not worry that that the house is going to get caught on fire, and there's not going to be another adult to help. Just that alone is underappreciated when you haven't experienced both. So I'd say the biggest thing for single moms is, before, especially if you know you're going to be a single mom before you give birth, to start working on your village. And whatever that village is, and that village can be other single moms. There were times in between marriages where I was partnering up with another mom. And so then I take all the kids, right? But then you got a break, right? And the reality is, You have one, sometimes it's even easier to have more than one because then they play with each other and you don't have to be the plaything, right? So finding other moms that understand, other moms that are also single moms, and then sharing some of those duties. Cook dinner, you just cook extra and you share the food. You share some of the childcare. You share some of that back and forth. And even as a married mom, I like doing that with one of my best friends that lives 7 minutes away. Our girls go to the same school. She was out last night. Her husband's out of town. She had to take one of her kids to do something because she's a senior. And so the one that's the same age as my little one was home by herself. I was on auntie duty, 7 minutes away. If you need me, she wanted to stay home by herself. But if you need me, then I'm here. Like that kind of thing, to have that as soon as you can, as much as you can, is such a gift. The other thing that I'll say, and I was wanted to share this story because I just said this to one of the clients that I'm still working with individually over the weekend. She is a single mom of twins. And she and I have been working together before she had her twins. And so yes, again, totally overwhelming. She just moved. I'm so happy for her. She found bought a house. She's so excited, but overwhelmed because you know how it is. Moving is hard. I think moving's hard if you're single. My husband says if we ever move again, we're going to leave everything here and buy new stuff at the new house.
That's me. I'm your husband. My husband will probably say the opposite, but it's so stressful.
It's so stressful. So imagine doing it with two little ones that I think they're like just a little over a year old, right? So they're moving, and so I gave her one of my words of wisdom from my own experience with my oldest daughter. At one point, I was working on my dissertation to get my PhD.
Oy.
And then I did it. It worked so well that I did it again with my youngest daughter. Get a mommy's helper. What's a mommy's helper? A mommy's helper is somebody, a neighbor, a family child that's too young to really babysit. So somebody that's like 8, 9, 10. So they're not really old enough for you to leave the house, but they're old enough to watch, to play with, to be there so that you can do something else. Right? So that and I did that. I had my oldest daughter, her preschool teacher's daughter, who was 9 years old, would come over on Sundays for 2 hours. And she would play with my little one when I think she was like 2.5, while I was working on my dissertation. I couldn't leave the house, but I didn't need to leave the house to work on my dissertation, but I needed to be able to focus. And I needed to know that my kid was okay. They're safe. They're in the other room. I could see them. I could hear them. I knew they were there, but I didn't have to give her my undivided attention. And I could focus on something else. So I think mommy's helpers, I think you need a village, all kinds of village. You need friends and family and other moms, but sometimes you just need a couple hours where you can put your feet up and watch a TV show or clean your house. And having a mommy's helper, which is less expensive because you can pay them like $5, $10, and they're so excited. A 9-year-old to get paid regularly and have, $10 extra to spend is magic for them. For the 9-year-old's mom, it's magic because they know that it's kind of like they're getting free babysitting, right? Because they can go do something else for these 2 hours. And for you, so it's a win-win-win all around. So that is one of my secrets. And I've done it twice with both my girls, and it worked out wonderfully. In fact, the second mommy's helper is now, I've adopted her as my niece. She was watching my little one while I cleaned the house because I couldn't find somebody that I cleaned as well as I did.
Yeah.
And so, but I didn't like the imagination play as much as, that's not my thing. But the kids need to do it. So she came over, she's a neighbor, and now I've adopted her as my niece.
I love that. So mommy helper. I've never heard that before because I've heard like babysitter and things like that, which we did do that for a minute. Like when in the thick of the pandemic, when like everything was closed, but we had like our bubbles. So we had like a person that came in and, but I would never have thought to have like another, a little older kid. That is so good. And I wanted to ask this though, how did you know, especially because you've had your kids far apart. So like you've been in like 2 different generations, right, of parenting. So I feel like now it's more talked about, or at least that's how my corner of the internet is, where I'm like, okay, I can ask for help. I have the permission because I see other women that look like me or that are, doing these type of things, like, taking breaks and reaching out. But how did you know back then? Like I'm just genuinely just asking, how did you know to ask for help?
Yeah. I don't know if I have an answer to that from so many years ago. I'd
Yeah.
say that, so I'll give my answer for most things of how I know is I follow spirit, right?
Yes.
That intuition, that little voice in your head that tells you to do something. And I knew that I needed to get my dissertation done, that I couldn't be a graduate school forever. I couldn't be a graduate student forever, that this was work that needed to get done and that I needed dedicated time to do it. So I suspect that somehow in some conversation with this preschool teacher, she mentioned that she had a child, and I followed spirit in that moment and asked if she'd be interested in letting her come over. But that was so long ago, I don't remember. I know the second time, um, the little girl, she was a little girl at that time. I think she was a little older, like 12, I think. I think she was in middle school. And yes, this is a very small block. So I'd seen her a few times. And one time we were outside playing outside the house and she came over and she kind of sat with my daughter and they talked and they played. And I thought, oh, they play so nicely together. And then I remembered how well that worked the first time. And so I asked her if she'd be willing to do that the second time. And so she started out as mommy's helper and ended up being babysitter because she just kept getting older and it wasn't fair to not pay her. But
That is good. And you're getting the wheels turning in my head because there are two neighbors that I have opposite side of me who like the kids. One of the neighbors, she's around that age. She's like has to be 9 or 10. She's not 13. At least she doesn't look like, but I'm like, oh, maybe. And my son, they have like 2 or 3 kids. Long story short, the other kids, they play along really well. I'm like, oh, they actually like genuinely like each other. So I have to figure out how to like kind of, I guess, make that conversation, because something else that's, I guess, I don't want to say unique to like raising kids like in the pandemic, we're all so secluded. Like, it was like 2 years at least where we all were like, we have to stay away from each other, right? So now I'm realizing like I need the community, like I need that support outside of my husband, right? So I like, because you also were saying, going back to the single moms, find single mom friends, like find other people that have the same family dynamic as you. It's really important.
yeah, it is. I think it's important to have, if you're married, having moms that are also married,
Yes.
just because you can share this understanding of what these dynamics are like. And although every household is different and unique, it's
Yeah.
still something about, with my best friend that lives 7 minutes away, talking about the challenges of having husbands and kind of how and we sometimes we problem solve together. Okay, well, this is kind of how, what do you think of this situation? How do I approach this? It's helpful to have somebody else that's in a dedicated long-term marriage, that get some of those dynamics that my single friends don't get, even if my single friends are parents,
Right.
parenting differently. So they can't understand, like, yeah, I have to kind of talk to my husband about this before I launch off into this kind of thing, because they don't have that experience.
Yep. Yeah. It's so important. And you're not alone is what I also want to tell people that are listening or watching this, is like, you're not alone, because I know I felt alone when I first had my kids, and it was so strange because I was married. Both of the grandparents live within a 30-minute radius, or 30 minutes away from us, but I still felt so alone. And so yeah, that, looking at going on to the next question, like I said, this is very informal, like it's team of one for now. But let me just get to the next question, because I love the mommy helper though. That is gold. I haven't heard that before, so like I like how you phrased that. Okay, so the second question is, do you remember the first 2 weeks? Like after the first 2 weeks, you came home, or you had the baby's 2 weeks. Do you remember that time period? Like, what were your thoughts? What was going through your head? And did you have another child to care for?
I remember the first 2 weeks with both of them. So with the oldest one, I was 25, so I was pretty much a baby myself. And what I remember is my oldest one had colic. Right? And I wanted to have, and you're going to ask me this question later, so I'm going to answer it now. Did I want to have children before I got pregnant? Yes. I so much wanted to have a baby, like for all my life, like probably since I was a little girl. I wanted to be a mom. It was so important to me. And so I really wanted this baby. I was really excited about this baby coming. And then she got here and she had colic and she cried nonstop. And I was looking for the return receipt because I didn't realize that I'd bought a product that you can't return. There was no return receipt. I had to keep this baby that I really wanted. But in that moment, those first, and you're talking the first 2 weeks, she would not stop crying. I was literally walking around with her in the snuggly thing, just pacing up and down the apartment. If I could get her to stop crying, I was scared to take her out. So I would lay down with the snuggly on, hoping that we both would be able to get a minute's rest. And it was overwhelming. As it turned out, she was allergic to milk. And my stress, depression, sadness, overwhelm, I was eating big chocolate brownies. I think it was brownies and big glasses of milk. Right?
Yes.
All of this milk product that she was allergic to. Fortunately, a lactation consultant suggested that I try eliminating all dairy. I did that within 3 days. Within 3 days, I had the happiest little bundle of joy. And we both got sleep. And then the waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning to breastfeed was glorious. I was like, oh, and we can go back to sleep. And that felt like nothing. So the first 2 weeks were overwhelming with the first one. And with the second one, the first 2 weeks were overwhelming. She was a preemie, not very preemie, but definitely a preemie. And so she had difficulty latching on. I had a new marriage. We got married and pregnant and had a baby and bought a house. So there was all this stuff that happened so soon. I had a 15-year-old teenager that trying to balance things out, premature baby. I was totally overwhelmed with the second one and depressed and overwhelmed. So that was another time. And I really wanted her as well. Like I had baby fever between these babies. I really wanted her as well, but I was so overwhelmed. That time, his family, I come from a very small family. He's a bigger family. His sisters actually were a lot of support. I needed that family support to make it through. So I'd say if anything, just know whatever's going on, it won't always be that way. Like whatever stress you're under, it won't always be that way because they get older. So things change. And to remember that, because in the moment when you're in it, it feels like it's never ending. And some of that's just exhaustion. And so just hold on to this will end. They will eventually sleep. They will stop crying. Like things will get better. Solutions will come. But you just have to hang in there.
That's so hard though, Dr. Akhu. I'm not gonna lie. It's hard because I'm still good. Like, well, my kids aren't, they're not even 5 yet, but going back to what you were saying, how right now it's physical, like it's a lot of physical labor, putting them in the bath, still changing diapers and potty training. And, it's just a lot of just like, in my head, I'm like, I can't wait for you to like do everything on your own. So it's hard to hear that, but at the same time, I receive what you're saying because my son is going to start kindergarten in a couple of months. And like, we have the graduation at the VPK. And I'm like, oh my God, like really, where did the time go? And I always like roll my eyes when people say that, but I'm like, holy cow. So lately I've been even practicing mindfulness even more, like really like I had a friend of mine say, pay attention to like the little things that they say. Like, you know, they might say like shoe diff weird. Like, remember those moments, Leslie. And so I catch myself like, you know, grabbing those moments or taking pictures of them doing something just so I can like remember, because this graduation and kindergarten transition, it's a big one. It's like the first one. So, I hear what you're saying. I hear it.
And I think there is something to, again, the community to remind you of that, because it is hard when you're in it. It is a lot of physical labor. It is hard, but it's also the sweetest time. Right? How cute they are and how funny they are when they're little. I think the sweet spot is probably really that 6 to 10, 11,
Okay.
when they still adore you and they're funny, and but they can dress themselves.
Yeah.
Right. You can say, okay, go take a bath, and you just kind of have to monitor. So there
Right.
is a sweet spot in the middle there, but all of it is yummy and juicy. And there's something so special when they're babies and they get so excited to see you and like all of that stuff. So I agree with your friend, mindfulness, to strive to enjoy as much of it as you can enjoy, and to try to find ways to, one, simplify the things that you can,
Mm.
and make the things fun. Make bath time fun for you as well as them. How can you enjoy this time? To make things as fun as possible, to enjoy it as much as possible, because you're in it. Bottom line is, you've had these kids, and as I've already found out for you, they don't come with return receipts. They're yours now, and they're yours. I have a 30-year-old. They're yours for the rest of your life. You
Yeah.
will always worry about them. You will always be there for them. But this is the fun part,
Mm.
is introducing them to new things and seeing their faces and how excited they are and all that stuff. This is the fun part. So you really have to enjoy the fun part, the funny way to say. I remember both my girls said doggy differently. One said dog we, and the other one said doggle. The first time she got so excited, she said dog, 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 doggle. And I remember that. And it brings me such joy to remember how they both said it differently, and how this is like one of their first words. So holding on to that, because there's going to come a time when you're going to need to dip into that, when they're a teenager and they don't like you and you've embarrassed them and they're snarky. You're going to have to dip into that love well, and to not, kill
Yeah.
them.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. Like, I hear you, Dr. Akhu, because my daughter is only 3. And I am just like, I have to catch myself. Like, I have to bite my tongue a lot, practice the mindfulness of like, okay, like she's figuring out the world and this is her personality. Like she knows what she wants. And I feel like being a mom, it's a lot of mirrors. We're all mirrors, right? But I feel like, especially with your kids, it's like a very like what is that really close up, the makeup mirror, where it's like,
Yeah.
like I want to look at all of those blemishes on my face. That's how I feel like with like my daughter. I'm just like, oh my goodness, like there's certain things that I'm just like, oh, why does that bother me? Her saying what she needs. Like, why does that shouldn't bother me? So I appreciate, I appreciate you saying that. Okay.
I just want to say,
Yeah.
I know you have another question, but I also found that threes to be more difficult than twos. I don't think anybody talks enough about how the challenges of three. I think two is definitely challenging, but I found, for my older daughter anyway, who was also very strong-willed,
Yes. Absolutely.
I found her three that year to be even more difficult. But one of the things the mantra I kept going in my head is, all these things that are making me a little crazy now are going to make her into such a strong woman. And that came to pass. That girl is so amazing. She is so strong. The places she has gotten herself into as a Black woman, the only Black woman often in many of those spaces, it's that strength that I did not beat out of her as a young child that has helped her become this incredible woman today. But there were definitely times when I had to keep saying that to myself. This is what's going to make her stronger. I want her to have this kind of strength in the world. I didn't want her to have that kind of strength with me necessarily at times, but trying to find that balance. I just wanted to say that because when you say three, I just remember thinking, I remember one day saying, people talk about the terrible twos, but nobody ever talks about these threes because there's something about the one more year of growth where they're more aware. Twos, they fall out because it's all they're dysregulated and they're babies and they just can't express it. 3-year-olds can express it more. And they
Yes.
tell you more of what they think. And I found that much more challenging.
No, definitely. I definitely agree. I don't remember my son being as strong-willed. So there's also that. Like I feel like girls and boys are definitely different. So it's been a whirlwind. But that's what I have to say that like I say something similar in my head. Like I want her to be confident and be the same strong-willed woman like when she grows up. So I love that. Well, you answered the last two questions already, but I'll just repeat them so like people know like what Dr. Akhu is referring to. So the next question is, they say it takes a village. We hear this all the time to raise a child. Like what did your village look like? Which you already kind of gave us, but if you have anything else, like what did your village look like and did you have support?
Yeah. So 2 different villages for 2 different children, 15 years apart. Didn't have as much of a village with my younger daughter, but again, created some of that, the mommy's helper, between marriages, connecting with other single moms and sharing. And then my husband has a big family, so really tapping into some of their strength. I wanted to say that one more example of this village idea, and a little bit more in terms of this Western idea of kind of doing it all on our own.
Yes.
Our neighbors are from Kenya. And when they moved here, they had 2 older kids that were, I think they were like high school, junior high school, and then they ended up having another baby here. So the older kids were born in Kenya. Their youngest was born here. And I remember them saying to us one day, this is crazy. In Kenya, there was always somebody to take the baby because they lived on a family compound with aunts and uncles and nieces. Like there were just a whole bunch of people. So when anybody had a baby, there was always somebody, always family to be there. They said, this thing in America is crazy. How do they expect you to do all of this? And just this idea that we expect ourselves to be able to take care of a whole nother human being without help is unrealistic. So to remember that we really do, everybody needs a village. I mean, even Hillary Clinton said that, right? So it's not even just a Black woman thing. Like this is just a human being thing, that we cannot raise children by ourselves. So remembering that, putting that in place, I just wanted to emphasize that story because I think that was so, I hadn't thought about it in terms of the difference in culture, but it is such a Western thing to think that we can do it by ourselves, and we really can't.
And I feel like, thank you for sharing that, like hearing that specifically, because I've never heard a specific story like that. And I feel like it's done by design, right? It's done by design, especially for Black people, Black women, like, it's done by design for us to feel alone. So then we burn out and then, ultimately like die early because we're so stressed out, right? So oh man, I've never heard that specific way of like the compound and like all the aunties and uncles everywhere, because I didn't have that. That's the thing too, like growing up in America, I didn't see that, and I would go to babysitters. Like my parents they had to find somebody to care for us because they had to work, right? But I do remember it was challenging for my parents. You had to just step out on faith and find people in the community that would care for us. And thankfully it all worked out extremely well my whole childhood. But I just wish it was easier. And I wish because it still was uncomfortable being a mom and trying and being like, okay, I need help. Like it felt very like it was very like a lot for me. It was a lot for me to be like, hey, can you come over or take the kids out for just for a few hours. Like that still, it felt weird. It felt weird to me to ask, but you're right. It's a whole other human. Like
whole other human that needs all the stuff that you need. One of the things that I focus on, and I do this probably mostly because I'm a psychologist, is that mindset shift. So I'm creating the Sista Peace spiritual family that is a tribe of Black women to support each other in making those mindset shifts. So if you're a Black woman and you just had a baby, this is a virtual tribe, so I don't know. I can't guarantee that there'll be a member close enough to come babysit, but there will be a member that's available to remind you
Mm.
of the importance of creating your community. To ask you, well, are there any neighbors around that are single moms too, or that have kids that are around 9 that could be mommy's helpers? There's going to be somebody in the community.
Mm.
To remind you of those things so that you can put those things in place, because especially when you're in the thick of it, you can't even always think of those things.
Yeah.
If you don't have models, you can't even think of those things. So to be in a community that can support you mentally, psychologically with, yeah, it's okay to rest. Yes, it's okay to prioritize. And if you don't get the dishes done today, the world's not going to fall apart. Is the baby still alive? Then
Right.
today, that might be all you need to focus on, is today the baby's still alive, you're still alive. Then the dishes can wait. Get some paper plates. I
Right.
know I'm concerned about the environment, but there are times when we
Yeah.
have to weigh the lesser of evils, and paper plates might be the lesser of evils today. So that's really important to me, to create that community, because I did have some community, but I know during the toughest times for me, that was one of the major things I needed to stay psychologically healthy, is community.
Psychologically healthy. And that's it. Oh, well, you're the psychologist. So it makes sense, those good words, because that's what it and that's the purpose behind one of the reasons I created this podcast, is to help more moms, specifically Black moms, get that, be psychologically healthy. Like that's something that is so important to me. And right now it is Mental Health Awareness Month. So if people are listening or watching during the month of May, like, really just emphasizing, you have to start within first. Like your psychological health is within, and it's something that a lot of us still we put on the back burner. Like we don't think it's important, but it's the most important work, is working within. And well, you already answered. The next question was, did you want to be a mom? And you said you did, which I think is beautiful. Do you want to go more into that, or share anything else about that?
Well, just that I really wanted it both times. It was really, really important to me. But again, even though I really wanted it both times, it doesn't mean it wasn't difficult when they got here. Both times it was difficult, and both times I was depressed when they got here. But I really wanted both my babies, and I'm so happy that I had both my babies.
Yeah, I love that. And I love, like, two things can exist, right? That's like coexist, right? Like you can want something, but at the same time, I heard you say, you had depression both times. Well, I would love to hear, this wasn't on the questions. What made you want to become a psychologist?
That's a great question. And it's actually kind of related to why I wanted to be a mom. I I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. My mom was a single mom. She was only 19 when she had me, just turned 19, like a couple of days before she had me. So she was a baby, and she was a single mom. I think her marriage to my dad lasted for a year. And so growing up with my father left my life, and in this community of Black people, just seeing men struggle, not having my father, watching my mother struggle, watching my aunties. My mom had a village. She's kind of, I guess, where this idea of village comes from. And for me, she had a lot of her good friends
Yeah.
that she grew up with became my aunties. So my mom's an only child,
Okay.
and I'm an only child. But those were the women that ended up supporting her and supporting me and loving me as well. But watching them get sick, not take good care of themselves, work themselves to death, eat themselves to death. So, and then at the same time, the Cosby Show is out.
Okay.
So, and we're talking about the Cosby Show. This has nothing to do with Bill
Yeah.
Cosby. About the
Yeah.
show.
Yes.
I always
Yep.
have to say
You're
that.
good. You're good.
And I remember thinking, okay, there's somewhere, and I knew that it was fiction, but still, this fiction's got to be based on some kind of fact, that there is an intact family, two parents, you know, and they looked healthy. I mean, again, I knew it was fiction, but it got me thinking about, if that's possible, why am I living around all of this? Why is it that all of these people around me don't look healthy, don't look happy? And that's what got me kind of interested. And I think I was born to be a healer because I was interested in medicine. I thought I might be a pediatrician or an obstetrician. But then I took my first psychology class in high school and I was hooked. I was like, oh, this explains the world. This explains why every character in every book, in every movie, why they do everything. This explains the world. I love this. This is what I want to do. And that's it, it's history from high school. I've done different things in psychology and I've had different focuses, but it was in high school when I took that first class that I totally fell in love with psychology, and still to this day love the mind.
Wow, that's beautiful. And I love the Cosby Show too. Like I agree. I hear you like really deep with that, because it just shows though the power of representation and TV, like what you're intaking, and that had a positive effect on you, because now you're able to transform other women and people's lives. Like that's incredible. That is incredible. So we're gonna close out one more question, and then if you have anything else to say and like share where people can find you, all of that stuff. What advice, which you did give, like you've given so much great advice, but I just want to ask the question so we have the proper segment. But what advice would you give to the new moms, the mom that's like in the thick of it? What would you tell her?
I'd say, which is kind of the same as your be gentle with yourself, give yourself grace. Really give yourself grace and understand that you have to take care of you. When you take a plane and I love the way they used to do it. Now they do a video, but I love it when the stewardesses used to do all that, the hand motions and all that stuff. But what they would say on a plane is if the oxygen mask drops, you have to put yours on first before you take care of anybody else. That is so important. If you fall apart, if you get sick, mom doesn't get a chance to get sick, right? If you get sick, if you fall apart, if you mental breakdown, then everything falls apart around you.
Yeah.
So it's so important that you choose to take time to take care of yourself, to try to keep that from happening. Because if you don't, it's going to happen, and it often happens at the worst times, right? And the worst ways. So if you can control it, if you decide to take the time to rest, to give yourself grace, to take care of yourself, then you have a lot more control over how that goes in your life. And if you don't do it, it's still going to come for you. So give yourself grace, prioritize. Again, be okay with some things are not priority, right? The dishes might not be priority today. And priorities change every day, right? Depending on what's going on. I keep a running to-do list. And I love my running to-do list because then I can move things, but I don't lose them, right? So I can move things to the next day. And I put all sorts of things, like what are the plans? I put, change the cat litter. I put those kinds of things on the to-do list. But the reality is now today, I didn't expect to have to go to the school to do this or to do that. So I might have to move some of those things, but they're still there. I've captured them. I can move them to another day when I'm not as busy. But really be prioritizing and knowing that priorities change depending on what's going on. If you had a bad night with the baby and you were up all night, then this might not be the day to do the laundry. You might wash out one pair of underwear and call it a day and be okay, right? And that might be, and give yourself that grace. Identify your village, which we talked about a lot. Identify the village, join some kind of village, whatever kind of village it is, but do not feel like you're in this alone. You can't be in this alone. You can't do it alone. Human beings were not made to do this alone. So make sure you don't try to do it alone. And find ways for self-care every day. One of the things that I did when I remember when my second one was little, I love babies. I wanted to have a baby, but they're not intellectually stimulating.
Right.
Right. So I would listen to books while I was playing on the floor with her. Sometimes I try to be mindful and really be in there and be with her. But then other times I'm here all day, 24 hours.
Yes.
Sometimes I need something at least intellectually stimulating. So to put a book, give myself permission to listen to something else, but still give her what she needs. So I'm still sitting there, playing, putting up the blocks. She's knocking them down, but you don't need all my attention to put up, you can knock them down. So kind of finding that balance so that you can feel like you are not, your brains are not oozing out through your ears because all you've done is watch. I was going to say Barney, but I didn't allow my kids to watch Barney. Sesame Street all day, which is a great show. I ended at that.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. One other thing before we close, I like how you, because I'm the same, but I don't like to admit I don't like imaginative play that much either. Like it's very challenging for me. So I catch myself feeling guilty because I'm just like, I just can't be on the airplane if I'm not really on the airplane. Like, and one thing that I've done, which I need to be better. Well, I try to make the conscious effort. I'll be like, okay, I'm going to spend like 15 minutes or something. Like I set a time that I'm going to like, and also like be on the level of my kids, especially like at this age. I try to make that conscious effort of like coming down to their level and like, playing the imaginative play. But I appreciate that you said that at the beginning that you're not really into the imaginative play and hence why you brought in mommy helpers, because the kids that are, that are young, they still like to do the imaginative play with the little kids, and the older kids like to be in charge. I've noticed that too. And then the little kids, they just listen. Like they listen better to them than to me, but
They look up to them. And yes, so I want to emphasize that. Be the kind of mom that you are. Don't try to be some other kind of mom. Find the ways to embrace the kind of mom you are, including if you want to work. Like some of us like working, right?
Right.
So finding that balance. I love your solution of 15 minutes. Yes, kids need this, but kids do not need to get every single thing from you. You'll always be mom, but you'll be a happier mom if you balance and be the kind of mom that really works for both of you, finding that balance. And that's where, again, the village can come in to help you figure that out. If you have the right village, right? You need a village, though, that is not judgmental, that's going to be supportive of helping you embrace your authenticity, not a village that's going to try to tell you what they think you should do, but help you figure out what works here. So I love that. 15 minutes is perfect. Having other kids do it, but just figure out what works for you as a mom and what doesn't work for you. And don't feel, I mean, there's some things we just have to do, but there's some things that we can find a good balance to not make it torturous for us, because there's enough of it that we have to do that we can't get away from.
Right. That was beautiful. I love this conversation, Dr. Akhu. Lastly, where can people find you online? Because you did mention that you have a virtual community. So can you please tell people that are craving? Because I know I was one of those people when I first had kids. I was craving for community, but I didn't realize. So go ahead.
Thank you so much, Lesline, for having me on. I'm so happy to be here, and I so enjoyed having this conversation with you. First of all, you can find Sista Peace, Sista with an A at the end. Peace is the name of the community, the tribe that I'm creating to support women, especially Black women. We're focused on Black women, but especially the stuff that's available for free is available for everybody and anybody, because there's so many just women that need support. So we're available on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn and YouTube. We have a website, which is sistapeace.com. And then there's my Dr.Akhu website, Dr.Akhu, DRAKHU.com. So everything can be found in one of those two places, and they refer to each other. We have a lot of stuff I share every day on Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube, some helpful tips to help people. We're focusing on depression this month. And then all the information about joining the family. So the spiritual family is a closed group of just Black women. And I'm looking for founding members right now. I'm trying to figure out, what do people need? I have some ideas, but I want to make sure that I'm giving the Black women what they need. And I wanted that to be a safe, closed space where we're looking for women who want to be authentic, want to help each other, willing to be vulnerable. We're not looking for anybody that wants to start a fight. We're here to support each other. That's what we're looking for, a community here. And so all the information will be on all those channels about that part as well.
And I'll thank you, Dr. Kuhn. I will make sure it'll be in the show notes below. This, you'll be able to watch this as well as listen. So I will make sure to put everywhere. And this was a really good conversation. A lot of takeaways, but the biggest takeaway was, this was the rest episode, but also actually this just came to my mind. You also said something about simplicity, like make it simple, because when you make it simple, you're giving yourself the opportunity to actually rest.
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to leave it on that note. So we tied it up because I was like, I got to bring it back to the rest. That's my type A self. But anyways, I am going to, we're going to hop off. Thank you everybody for watching and listening. I appreciate it.